Compañeras y compañeros.
Dear friends,
Deseo en primer lugar
first of all,
agradecer al
I would
encargo
like
que
to
pronuncie las palabras
thank
finales de esta emotiva
thank all of you
sesión
for giving me the
constitutiva
honor of
de la
closing
novena legislatura
this
de la Asamblea
Constituent
Nacional
Assembly
del Poder
for the
Popular,
ninth term of the
que se
popular
efectúa
power,
precisamente hoy
which takes place today.
cuando se cumple
Today,
el 57 aniversario
in the 57th anniversary
de la victoria alcanzada en Playa
of
Girón
the victory of
bajo el
Playa
mando
Girón
del comandante en
under
jefe
the
Fidel Castro
Commander-in-Chief
Ruz
Fidel
sobre la
Castro
invasión
Ruz
mercenaria
about the
organizada,
mercenary invasion
financiada
organized,
y
financed
desembarcada por el gobierno de los Estados
by
Unidos.
the government of the United States.
Este hecho histórico
This
reviste
moment in
mayor
history
relevancia por ser la primera
has a
vez
greater
que los
relevance because it was
combatientes
the
del
first
ejército
time
rebelde,
that the fighters
policías
of
y
the
milicianos
rebel army,
lucharon
the
defendiendo
police
la
and the
bandera del
civilians
socialismo
fought by defending the flags
proclamado
of
por Fidel el
socialism,
16 de
which was
abril de
proclaimed by Fidel on
1961
April 16,
en la despedida del
1961,
duelo de las víctimas de los bombardeos
when
a las
saying
bases
goodbye to the
aéreas.
victims of the bombing of
Como
the
es
air bases.
conocido,
As
en la última
it is
sesión
well known,
ordinaria de la
in the
octava
last ordinary
legislatura,
session of the
la
8th
Asamblea
term,
Nacional aprobó
the
extender
National
el
Assembly
mandato de los
approved the
diputados del
extension of the
Parlamento
mandate
cubano
of the congressmen
y de
of
los
the
delegados
Parliament of
de las
Cuba,
asambleas
as well as the
provinciales
delegates of the
a
provincial
causa de las
assemblies,
graves
due to
afectaciones
the
ocasionadas
difficult
por el huracán Irma,
effects of
cuyo
Hurricane
impacto
Irma,
directo
whose
sobre
direct
casi
impact
todo el territorio
over
nacional
almost
determinó
all
la
the national
necesidad
territory
de
led
ajustar
to the
el
need
cronograma del
of
proceso
adjusting the
electoral
timeline for the electoral
el
process
que concluimos hoy
that we
y
conclude
que ha
today,
contado con una masiva participación
process
ciudadana
that has seen the
en una
massive
muestra
participation
más
of the
de
citizens,
respaldo a la revolución
once again
y nuestra
showing their
democracia
support to the
socialista.
revolution and
Es
our
oportuno
socialist
reconocer el
democracy.
trabajo desarrollado
It is the time
por las
to acknowledge
comisiones
the work
electorales y
created
de
over the
candidaturas
electoral
a
and
todas
candidacy
las
commissions
instancias,
in every
así como el
instance,
conjunto
as
de
well as
instituciones
the group of
que
institutions
colaboraron
that
para el
have
buen
collaborated
desempeño de las
for the
elecciones.
development of the elections.
El sexto Congreso del
The
Partido,
6th Congress of the party
efectuado en abril del 2011,
that took place on April
aprobó
2011
la propuesta
approved the
de
proposal
limitar un máximo
of
de dos
limiting
periodos consecutivos
a
de
maximum
5
of
años
2
el
consecutive
desempeño
5-year
de los
terms
cargos políticos
for
y estatales
political positions,
fundamentales.
as
En
well
igual
as of the
sentido
state.
se pronunció el séptimo
For
Congreso,
this, the 7th Congress took place
y aunque
2
esta
years ago,
limitación no ha
and
sido
even
todavía
though
introducida
this
en la
limitation has not
Constitución,
been
cuestión
included
que
in the
esperamos
Constitution
sea
yet,
establecida en el marco
we
de
hope
su reforma
that this will be established under
desde
the
que asumí
framework
mi
of your
segundo
reforms
mandato como
ever
presidente de
since
los
I started
consejos de
working
Estado
with
y
my
de ministros,
second term
el
as the
24 de
President of the
febrero
Councils of State
del
and Ministers on
2013,
February 24,
expresé que este
2013.
sería el último,
I said that this
lo
was
cual
going to be the last
ratifiqué el
one,
pasado
and I
diciembre,
ratified this
cuando
on
desde aquí
December,
mismo
where from
afirmé
this
que a
very
partir
place
de hoy
I
Cuba
ensured that
tendría
starting today,
un nuevo
Cuba
presidente.
will have
No
a new
era
president.
necesario esperar a
There was no
realizar
need
una reforma
to wait
constitucional
for a
para
constitutional
cumplir
reform
la palabra empeñada y
to
actuar
comply
en consecuencia.
with my worth
Más
and act
importante
consequently.
aún,
And it is even
era
more
dejar
important
el ejemplo.
to leave an
La
example,
Asamblea
to set
Nacional
an example.
del Poder
The
Popular
National Assembly of the Popular
eligió al
Power
compañero
elected
Miguel
Miguel
Díaz
Díaz-Canel
como
Bermúdez
presidente de los consejos
as
de
president
Estado y
for
de
the
ministros.
councils of states and
Al
ministers.
propio tiempo,
At the same
también
time,
resultó electo el compañero Salvador Valdés Mesa,
Salvador Valdés Mesa was also elected as first vice president of the Council of the State.
posteriormente la Asamblea
And
Nacional
further
aprobó
on,
su
the
designación
National
como
Assembly
primer
approved
vicepresidente del
his
Consejo de
appointment
Ministros.
as first vice president of the
compañero
Council of
Díaz-Canel
Ministers.
acumula una
Díaz-Canel
trayectoria liberal,
has
laboral
a working trajectory of almost 35 years after receiving the degree of electronic engineering in the Central University of the Villas, and he worked without procession. He did his service in the army. After this, he was a professor in the Faculty of Electric Engineering of the university, where he was proposed as member of the Union of Communist Young People, and he continued raising positions in this organization until he got the promotion for his professional job in the party since July 1984, the third or fourth year of the special request, when the consequences of that situation were at their highest level, matching with this stage, the greater one of the special period. He was the first secretary of the Committee of Villa Clara for 9 years and carried out his duties in the province of Holguín for 6 years. In both cases, results were satisfactory. It wasn't happenstance that after the 9 years in Villa Clara, well, he was born there, and he knew his province. I include Cienfuegos here, as well as Santi Espíritu. And he was sent to one of the bigger countries of the East, the province of Holguín, as part of his preparation, as part of his training. We've tried to do this with around a dozen young people who were able to reach the political bureau. But we were not able to materialize their preparation. And he is the only survivor. Maybe I'm exaggerating. He was the only survivor of this group. This group, I'm not criticizing this group, but when I spoke with Machado, I said, we are the ones who should criticize each other for not creating a better organization for the training and preparation of the rest of the people to have high responsibilities in the party and the government. In 15 years, I was only in 2 provinces, and without all the years that I was working with the youth in the province where I come from. And I told Machado as well that 15 years should at least have brought him 3 years to different provinces of the country so that he could get to know them better. I'm not criticizing Machado. Maybe I over-criticize him. But now, as I am criticizing him, brace himself, brace yourselves. But with this, we need to pay even more attention to the preparation of the rest of the people. Because when they work in different positions, they will have a greater idea, a greater domination. Being appointed today is not happenstance. This has been foreseen with the group, and the best, based on our opinion and the opinion of the party, the best one has been Díaz-Canel. And we are sure that due to his experience and dedication to work, as well as his virtues, he will be successful in the task that has been granted by the main institution of the power of the people.
Vuelvo al texto.
Coming back to my notes. He is a member of the Central Committee of the party since 1991, and he was promoted to the political bureau 15 years ago. He had international missions in Nicaragua and graduated from the School of National Defense. In 2009, he was appointed Minister of Higher Education, and in 2012, Vice President of the Council of Ministers for the attention of the organizations linked to education, and then to the organizations linked to science, sports and culture. 5 years ago, he was elected first vice president of the councils of states and ministers, and ever since, a group of the people of the political bureau were absolutely certain that we were spot on and that we had found the solution that today is materializing in this important meeting. The last positions I spoke about, mainly the first vice president of the Council of Ministers in the state, is a position that he worked at the same time by attending the spirit of the ideology of the party. And this is not casualty. Something as important as this had to go by the hands of the one who today is the president of the Council of State and Ministers. And when I'm gone, I hope that he will continue as the first secretary until 2021, and he can exercise this condition of president of the Council of State and Ministers, and Secretary General of the Communist Party, first Secretary of the Communist Party. It has been planned like this. It has been planned like this. By keeping the following proposal of the Assembly that will also be analyzed with the Council of Ministers in the session that will take place in July, where the Commission for Congressmen will also be proposed, those who will be in charge of drafting the project for the new constitution that will be presented in this assembly, that will then be discussed with the population and will be elected in a public referendum. I said this already. Our next constitution will show no changes on our strategic objective for the work of the party. We will continue with this, and of course our people will support this, as they did many years ago with a great amount of votes. And we spoke in the referendum about the current constitution. What year was it? 76. 1976. What was the percentage? 98%. 98%. And back then, these two positions were put together. They are needed. The president, the first secretary of the party, the president of the Council of Ministers will have in his hands all the power and influence that is required, even though there could be a prime minister in charge of the government. I am already saying that we have been discussing about the possible statement that will take place with this commission that we propose for you in July. The two mandates must be complied as established in the Constitution, 5 years each. The Congress of the party will continue with the date set. I was chosen in the 7th Congress of the party until 2021. I am already 87. I will become 87 on June 3. I'm not saying this to get a present. I know it's difficult to get one. Getting a present here is difficult, even though it could be a small one. Getting a present here, even though modest, is more difficult than finding oil. So don't send me anything. And after his 2 terms, if he's working right and is approved by our party, by the central body, the power of state of the assembly we are all part of, then he should continue. The same thing that we are doing with him, he should do with the one that comes after him. After the years that he will be working, he will be the first secretary in order to make way for transit, safe transit, and saving us learnings of the substitute until he retires to take care of the grandchildren that he will have. Well, you already have grandchildren. Maybe you'll have great-grandchildren. I have grandchildren. I will soon have great-grandchildren. This is what we think in the higher organization of the party. The state will decide and will make the final decision that the activities of which I have just spoken will take place. We live in a place and times where mistakes cannot be allowed. Whenever I have time, I take a look back at myself and I listen to the difficult events that have taken place in the recent history, that has taken place internationally throughout the world. And we cannot make mistakes, not only due to the location where we are living, nor due to any other reasons. There are mistakes that we cannot make, as they have thrown away an important process for humanity, where the consequences have been paid by many countries, the consequences of the international disbalance that was created. Many countries have paid for this, and we're still paying for this. And many of the countries are paying for this, including ours. Do you understand what I'm saying? Díaz-Canel is not someone who's winging it. Throughout the years, he's shown maturity, working capacity, social ideology, political sensitivity, commitment, and fidelity to the revolution. His promotion to the higher position of the government of the country is not random, and it's not something that happened in a hurry. In his promotion for higher positions, unlike what happened in the past with other cases of young leaders, as I said previously, we were not mistaken by speeding up the process, but intentionally ensured this for the transit about different responsibilities in the party and the government, as I said. few seconds ago. Therefore, his level of comprehensive preparation, together with his personal qualities, will allow him successfully take our state and our government, and later on, the greatest responsibility in the party, as I mentioned. Valdez Mesa, on his side, also has a long trajectory of service for the revolution. He was a farmer. He enlisted in the army of the revolution. He worked with the literacy campaign and worked in the Association of Rebel Youth, becoming the General Secretary in the region I mentioned, becoming part of the Communist Youth, had him become a secretary, and he was a delegate in the first Congress of this organization. Later on, he worked in the construction of the Party of the Socialist Revolution of Cuba in different regions of Camagüey, and he held positions of direction at the municipal level and in the municipal commission of the party, and then he started working in the union, ranking up the positions up to second secretary of the Central of Workers of Cuba, CPC, and Secretary General of the National Union of Agricultural and Forest Workers. In 1995, he was appointed Minister of Work and Social Security, and 4 years later, he was promoted to First Secretary of the Provincial Party in Camagüey. In the 19th Congress, CPC, which took place in 2006, he was elected General Undersecretary, and he kept this position until 2013, where he was elected Vice President of the Council of the State. He continued working and earned his degree in 1983 as agricultural engineer in the Higher Institution of Agricultural Sciences of Sierra de Ávila. He is a member of the Central Committee of the party since 1991 and of its political bureau for 10 years. Likewise, it is important to say that José Ramón Machado Ventura, with his own and interested initiative, and I say this again because this has been said before, in order to allow Díaz-Canel to get the position that he held as first vice minister, first vice minister of the Council of State, and with his own initiative, once again offered his position to create a space for the new generation. Machado, who I have been working for over 60 years from Sierra Maestra in the revolutionary fight, and the second East Front, he was one of the founders of it, is an example of being modest, honest, and always devotion for work. He has a temper, you know this, but he will put his efforts for the party as the second secretary of the Central Committee. Additionally, I must acknowledge Mercedes López Acea, who's a member of the political bureau that was set free from the position of President of the Council of the State yesterday's evening, and after more than 8 years of hard work in front of the party under this very complicated capital, A task that becomes even more complex due to this, because it is the capital. Will now have new positions, new duties in the Central Committee of the party.
La composición del Consejo de Estado elegido hoy
The Council of the State, chosen today by the National Assembly, shows 42% of new members. This is a renovation, and it grows. And as Díaz-Canel mentioned previously, there's feminine representation adding up to 48.4%. It is growing, as you can see. But now we must continue, as you say, with charges for decision-making activities, not only numbers. Listen, the percentage of women of 48.4% and of black people at mixed race up to 45.2%. And from one side and the other, we will never take a step back, a single one, because it's taken a lot of years, ever since the triumph of the revolution, starting with Fidel, who was the one who started with these ideas. Ideas for the equality of women, and against the will of many old fighters in Sierra Maestra, where a platoon was created called Marianas Grajales, and there's one there. Puebla Viltres, who is a congresswoman, is around there. One of the officers of that battalion. And this has been very difficult. And we still need to fight the battle of the ratios. The ratio, the percentage, on areas not only regarding to numbers, but qualitative aspects, decision-making positions. Women already, as well as the black, have been trained in the country. This is a sample. Let's take a look at each one of them. It has been difficult, and that's why I say this. Never take a step back and bring them to decision-making positions, not because they come from a given race, but because of their qualification. And sometimes I've been mistaken because I've tried to reach an objective without the conditions required for the people appointed, and then I have to rectify this. But this is something that we cannot leave up in the air. What do journalists think? The average age of the parliament was reduced to 54 years of age, and 77.4% came from the triumph of the revolution. Years have gone by, of course. But we haven't given up. But years have gone by. 3 women have been chosen as vice presidents of the Council of State. 2 of them were black. But not only because they're black, but due to their virtue and qualities. This is another demonstration of the compliance with the agreements issued by the party and the first national conference in 2012 about the policy on this. This is how we show, together with the fact that almost or more than half of the congressmen in the National Assembly 52.3% are women, and the representation of black people and mixed race is 40.49%, and this is how it shall continue. You can see that already some of the members here are black, and others are working in TV as anchors and journalists and also on the radio. You can see that we already have some, and this hasn't been easy. I saw the training. I provided training for the people in radio and television. And I told them, do this without affecting anyone, but little by little solve this. And some steps have been taken. Not enough, from my point of view. They need to continue, but not as slow, not as slow. Keep on progressing, but faster, so that no one can say that they were affected because someone had to fight for the position with someone of a mixed race or black. Now there's a big black man who uses his hands instead of a pointer, and he provides the weather every day in the news. They don't know. Well, he doesn't know what to do with his big hands. He has a map that shows the weather forecast, but it could be better if he would use a pointer, wouldn't it? But we can see this person already being part of the main news report, and no one has been fired due to this. So we need to think about things, just not say, and comply with the things that we promise. And look for new methods. Try to avoid making mistakes, to stop the criticism for our noble objectives. And we need to think and think again for solutions whenever we're not able to solve our problems. Is this the way it works? Of course it is. That's why I'm saying this, and that's why I'm not following my speech that has been created for such an important occasion as today. To show the things that we've seen. This is very useful. And there are many years that I've seen and analyzed. And the detail about women, about race, is something I've been working on for quite a while. We should never be ashamed to remember certain particular discussions. And I'm speaking about non-official meetings. I was born in the field in Vidán, in the municipality of Cue. I'm cubetense and holguinero, but I had my education in Santiago, and of course have a strong bond with it. And I remember when I was a student, before the revolution won, because we might forget about this. I only remember 3 places. Havana. I'm not speaking about the original size of the Havana, not due to the division that it has today. Havana, Santiago de Cuba, and Guantánamo. I'm talking about the cities. Cities where we did not have TV, and there was a radio. I remember the radio, no TV, but radio. And the small towns usually were part of municipalities. There was always a square, a park, and this was the part that was always planned by the Spanish planners. The oldest people that are gathered here today remember Sundays. Sundays in some of these places where the musical band of the municipality would play at night. And you would see young lovers and friends as well, white people walking inside the park. and black people on the outside of a fence. Was it the case? Was it like this? I know that there's a lot of young people, but you might have heard of this. And this lasted until the first speech of Fidel in 1959, January or February, that the roots were still there. A country that should acknowledge the ethnic groups of their people. A people that was born with a fight. And the war for independence. Where in 68, 150 years ago, it will shortly happen in October. You know who were the main chiefs, right? Those were enslavers. Slavers that started freeing their slaves. And when this war, after the failure, the agreement of Sandón, which was then taken by Antonio Macedo and his officers in the Baraguá protest. Glorious Baraguá protest. When this pact was reached, a great majority of the chiefs were already black people. And when the war started in 95, they were the ones who led the war, mainly. Then, history happened. The participation of the North Americans in the last days of the war, when Spain was already defeated with tens of thousands of Spanish soldiers who were even hospitalized, tens of thousands, some of them due to wounds, but most of them due to tropical diseases that the Spanish soldiers were not accustomed to. Amongst them was my father, who was evacuated with this. He was part of the war in Morón, and he was evacuated by the same place where he came in Cienfuegos, and then he came back. He came back the next year. And I am happy about this. If he wouldn't have come, another one had come, because he fell in love with Cuba and came back. And as I said once to a Spanish politician, adding this that I was happy about, I said, maybe if this wouldn't happen, I would come from Galicia today, and maybe I would have been a member of a different party. But then, when the Americans came in the east of Santiago de Cuba with no obstacles, because they were protected by the Liberation Army, and the American fleet and the Spanish fleet was more modern, they were shooting targets, and this was concentrated in Santiago de Cuba, in the bay, and they dismounted artillery to safeguard the city. But they get the order from Madrid to fight against the American fleet without knowing what was ordered from Madrid with a better fleet. And one by one, living in the Bay of Santiago, just like most bays in Cuba, with the exception of Girón and the one in north. And Cervera, who was in charge of the Atlantic Fleet, ordered all the officers to dress in their best clothes. And someone said, but we are fighting. And he said, yes, this is our last fight. And it was exercise of target shooting, one by one. 2 combats happened on land in Bisu, where the Spanish general was killed fighting, and taking the San Juan mountain that is now already devoured by the city. And then the original sin started. The troops were victorious. They were entering Santiago de Cuba. But the American general in front of the troop did not allow Cubans to participate. He was Calixto Garcia, the one who was there, or somewhere around it. And the second, they only had pretexts, they only had reasons of avoiding any type of retaliation, because they would capture prisoners and they would only care about their guns, and some of them became part of our liberating forces. And even worse, the original sin for what came after, when they reached the house of the government, they took down the Spanish flag and set the American one. And this already showed what was going to happen in this country until Fidel came. This was discussed in Paris, in the Palace of Versailles, in the outside of the capital of France. And of course, Spanish and Americans, Cubans, of course, were not needed for their participation. So with this equality, in the beautiful army that we had back then, already there was discrimination. If you went to a sugar factory, you would see the club. The club of Americans and the Cubans who said that worked in an office or had a given responsibility, those who attended the club, while the rest in a different place. That's their influence, and this happened until the revolution of 1933. But then we were facing this until January 1st, 1959. The beautiful crucible of our nationality. Now, we are building this again, this crucible. And this did not happen in the first moment. Do you understand what I'm saying? Was it like this or not? I am asking the oldest one in the audience. Here, there are still some older people. Guillermo Garcia. Is this truth? Poverty was the one that united them. Sorry about not continuing with my speech, but I think I'm reaching the topic. The press can say whatever they want. They can never speak of what I'm saying here today, because I am speaking about this for the first time. So I had to stop with this point. When this material was being written, of course, I wasn't thinking about what I just said. I thought about this later when seeing the results and when seeing the members of this new assembly. Now, speaking about this, I will continue with my speech. The members were ratified. Many of them, women of the Presidency of the National Assembly of the Popular Power, in charge of Esteban Lazo Hernández. Likewise, the proposal of President Díaz-Canel The Cuban Parliament approved, based on what established on Article 75 of the Constitution, to postpone for the next meeting the presentation of the Council of Ministers with the purpose of having time to assess the movements required. And this is a wise decision in order to avoid doing this in a hurry and to speak with the ministers one by one so that they can show their arguments, their ideas, and then make decisions to bring the proposals to the assembly that will take place in July, as we said. In regards to me, I will continue with my position of First Secretary of the Central Committee of the party in my second and last mandate that will conclude in 2021, as I mentioned. In the 8th Congress, one the transfer process continues in an orderly fashion for the main duties to the new generations. From that moment on, if my health contributes, I will be another soldier with the people defending this revolution. So, to be clear, I would like to emphasize that the Communist Party of Cuba, starting with the first Secretary of the Central Committee, will support the new President of the Councils of State and Ministers when exercising his constitutional attributions and contributing to the safeguarding of our most important weapon, unity of all those who work for the revolution and the people. There's no other way. Those of us who had the privilege of fighting for Cuba under the command of Fidel in the clandestine fight and until today, we believe that the heroic people of Cuba has a deep satisfaction on the works of the revolution, the most beautiful work that we have ever created. And this leads us to happiness. And we have the confidence of seeing with our own eyes the transfer to the new generations, the generations with the mission of continue building socialism and thus ensuring independence and national sovereignty. April 4, 1962, when closing the first Congress of the Association of Young Rebels, Fidel said, "Believing in the youth is seeing through them. Not only enthusiasm, but also capacities. Not only energy, but duties. Not only a young age, but heroism, purity, will, love to a nation, faith for the nation, love for the revolution, faith in the revolution, trust in ourselves, deep convictions that the youth can, that the youth will be able to continue, because on the shoulders of the youth, a lot of tasks can be granted." This was the quote. See the concept, how wide about this aspect related to the youth and their capacity for working. This is how it has been and will continue like this. And not because one of the most important bets of the enemies of the revolution is to divide and to take away the youth from the culture, the history, and the work of the revolution by creating on them individualism, greed, mercantilism of feelings, and inducing the new generations to pessimism, lack of ethics, and humanistic values as solidarity and the sense of duty. These plans are meant to fail because through history, in the present and in the future, the Cuban youth has been a protagonist for defending the socialist revolution. 87.8% of the Congress of this assembly were born after January 1st, 1959. The young Cubans have shown how right Fidel was when he spoke in 1962. We, today, ratify this confidence because we should will be the guardians of the ideas in the brilliant definition of the concept of revolution of the Commander-in-Chief. The party, the state, and the government will have to fulfill the policy of promote the young people, the young, the black, and the mixed race people on decision-making positions so that we can ensure the creation of the young leaders of the nation for the future without making the same mistakes that we have already made. In the fifth meeting of the Central Meeting that took place on the 23rd and 24th of March of last year, we analyzed the state of the update of the economic and social model of Cuba. Previously, this was carried out in the Political Bureau. But this has started since 2011, complying with the agreements of the 6th Congress of the party. Previously, twice, the Political Bureau spoke about this. Regardless of the events that have taken place, many events, we believe that for this moment, when we approved or made the first decision, the 6th Congress of the party, and in the meetings after that, we believe that for this moment, the progress would have been greater, that all the problems would have been resolved, that everything would have been perfectly organized and in execution with different levels of development. We would already have a new constitution. We are delayed due to these reasons. These problems are not solved. But clearly, we were not able to ensure the participation of bodies, organizations, and entities so that from the base they could be able to train and implement the policies approved. When I saw the first problems that we were facing, I said, it was a summary of the parliamentary session, and without a hurry, but continually, because hurrying up also meant mistakes. We never thought that it was going to be a short and easy way. We knew that we were starting a process that was extremely complex due to its scope, a scope that had all the elements of society And thus we needed to overcome the colossal obstacle of a mindset of decades of paternalism and equalitarianism, with significant sequels in the economy. Together with this, the will to continue faster than the capacity of doing things right, which left breaches and gaps for improvisation and naivety due to the lack of comprehensiveness, as well as the lack of valuation of the costs and benefits, and a restricted view on the risk associated to the application of different measures that were not driven or controlled or followed appropriately. This led to delays in the timely correction of the deviations that we found. I believe that we have learned important lessons of the mistakes we've made in the term that has gone by, and the accrued experience will allow us to continue firmly with our feet on the earth and avoid any setbacks. We have not renounced to continue with our own work. I have already spoken about this many times in different interventions in this parliament. This is an option under the framework of the current legislation, and it is not a neoliberal privatization process of the social property. It will, however, allow the state to get rid of the administration of non-strategic activities for the development of the country, and it will continue with the experiment of non-agricultural cooperatives. For both directions, results have been good. But still, we're able to see the mistakes in all the different aspects that favored the creation of different manifestations of indiscipline, as well as the tax evasion in a country that barely had any taxes before these measures, violations of laws for personal enriching. This, in a timely fashion, was tackled and led to the need of modifying different regulations for this. At the same time, the premise that we will never leave any citizen by himself, and that the process for changes in the social and economic model of Cuba under any circumstance could not mean the application of shock therapies against the ones in need, who are often the ones who firmly support the socialist revolution. And like what's happening in different countries, this conditioned the pace of the transformation for transcendental topics as the solution of the monetary duality and exchange rate, which continues hurting us, and also creating new problems. We could also quote the examples of pensions and salary reforms, as well as the deletion of gratuities and jealous subsidies to products and services instead of people that have no other way of living. We've also lacked the systematic approach for social communication about the changes that have been established in order to reach every single citizen with clear expositions, because this is something very difficult to understand in some of their aspects, about topics as difficult, trying to avoid information gaps. Based on this, I would like to add the different circumstances where we have to guide the national economy throughout all these years, where the economic blocking mistakes have taken place, as well as the continuous pursuit of financial transactions of the country by limiting the access to sources of credit for development, just like the obstacle on the foreign investments, which are very necessary. I mustn't forget all the damages that have been caused during the times of drought, as the last drought that lasted for 3 years, and the hurricanes that have hit the whole of the national territory. On the other hand, the results achieved are clear in the process of reordering the external debt with the main agents that freeze the current and future generations of a set of duties on the future of our nation, like the sword of Damocles, but not the last one. For this activity, there's been a very important participation of the current Vice President of the Council of Ministers and the Minister of Economy, Cabrizas.
¿Dónde está? Aquel que está allí.
That's a wonder.
Y no solo en esa la principal, sino
not only there in the main one, but also with different tasks related to debt. Nevertheless, we need to tread lightly, because we only know how to make requests, but we don't know how to rationalize. And as a president of the Council of the State, the Minister, I am the one who authorizes the use of reserves. And I know what I'm speaking about. As well as the loans from the reserve. And there was a moment where, due to violations, due to ignorance, the reserves for mobilization of the country are now back where they are. I'm speaking about fuel, which was used without authorization, but this was a mistake. And because we were not watching, we were not following the original documents about the provisions for this. And many times, when requesting the reserves of any product, I am trying to be tricked with things that are as easy as saying, we need this number of tons of fuel for this day. Reason? And they gave me a reason that it was not the right one, of course. It wasn't real. They told me I cannot grant this amount because every day there are needs everywhere. So then hospitals will be affected. I listened. And of course then my answer was different in terms that I will not repeat here. But it was a severe warning. Don't try to trick me with nonsense like this. affecting hospitals. But regardless of this, we allow them to have this film, and they need to pay back in the terms established. And I'm only quoting one example. This is part of the reality, and the Council of Ministers know about this. And due to a persistent and long effort, we were able to negotiate all this debt. We were able to provide certain concessions, change the terms, and comply with this commitment. And mainly, the prestige of the credit of the government. And after this task that we build step by step, sometimes you cannot even see it, but then we go back and put on our effort. And the consequences that we once again see this, not as much as we did before, because these are the problems that we have for planning. And when I speak about planning, we need to have better planning. And we need to know how to use what we have. And the rest, we will need to see how we solve them. We cannot just create a way. If we are hungry today, we will not be tomorrow. This is realism. We were speaking about this. This is a revolution. And the Damocles sword has always been part of our revolution, always on our neck. And due to different origins, of course. I remember the special request. And when things were in the best situation, when the party was taken over in Villa Clara. In that stage, we had to wear oxygen masks. That snorkel type, the one used by submarine fishers, because water was above our message, and sometimes even over our own nose, and sometimes to our eyes, and then we needed to use snorkel. But we resisted, and that's why we're here today.
Y romper el pesimismo que suele florecer en a los de escasa voluntad.
The scars will whenever there's problem. This is not the first time. Problems with the pedido especial. This happened in 93 or 94. It started in 90. So, this motto that was created on July 26, yes, we can. But in order to channel every project with objectivity in every state, we need to be clear. We don't need to trick ourselves. And now, against the current situation of the neighbor that we have, they're remembering the amend. It's not an amend, is it? What is it? The Monroe Doctrine. You remember what the Vice President was told last week, the Vice President of the United States? The current tensions in our external finance are a warning for this, for what I've mentioned. There is no other option rather than planning with secure basis and saving and getting rid of all the expenditures that are not absolutely necessary, and there's many of those today. Ensuring that we get the necessary income that will allow us to comply with the duties, and at the same time ensure the resources to invest in the development of the prioritized sector of national economy. We are not under extreme and dramatic situation as the one that the Cuban people was able to withstand with Fidel in the first years of the 90 in the last century. This stage was known as Pedido Especial. Now, the environment is different. We have a strong basis so that these things will not happen again. Our economy has diversified and continues growing. However, the duty of people of the revolution is to be prepared for the worst case scenario, not for the best. Continually being optimistic and always believing in this, always knowing about the behavior of resisting and resisting. There's no other solution. As it was stated in the previous day, in the general meeting of the Central Committee of the party, there was an explanation about the studies that have been carried out, about the need to reform the Constitution in accordance to the transformations that have taken place in the political order and the economic order too. In order to carry out this process, this assembly will need to approve in their next ordinary meeting a commission of congressmen that will have to create and present the process that will discuss the parliament and then send it to general consultation, and based with the Constitution, approve the ultimate text in a referendum, as I mentioned seconds ago. This is the best moment to once again state that we are not trying to change the character of socialism in our political and social systems, nor the role of the leading party of Cuba as the main force of society and the state, as it is established by Article number 5 of the Constitution of our country, and that in the next one we will defend, we will have this in the same place, 5th article. And now, speaking about foreign policies, I need to speak about the 8th Summit of the Americas that took place in Peru, which was said before and was based on the neo-colony attitude and hegemony attitude of the government of the States, whose commitment with the doctrine, with the Monroe Doctrine, has been ratified once again. The most notorious expression was shown in the unfair exclusion of the country of Venezuela of this international event. We knew that the government of the States wanted to set there a show of propaganda against the Cuban Revolution by taking advantage of the remnants of the mercenary revolution. Cuba went to Lima due to their rightful right, and because we wanted to, in order to debate in any environment, in conditions of equality and respect. And at the same time, it confirmed the ratification of Cubans to defend the principles, the values, and their legitimate space. The delegation of Cuba with the Bolivian delegation and other countries created a front to fight the unique front that is against the Bolivarian Revolution and claimed for a new system of relations between the two sides of America. The interventions of our Chancellor, Bruno Rodríguez Padilla, on behalf of the Cuban government, with a clear language, as well as clear ideas and firmly, were an answer to the insults and lies in the speech of the American vice president who was there. The members of the civil society of our country fought a battle against exclusion of the neocolonialism, which has a defender in the OEA, and they knew that they were the representatives of the Cuban people. They raised their voice for Cuba and for the peoples of our America. They were defeated. On behalf of this heroic people, I want to congratulate all the members of the Cuban representation that were part of this event. The countries of our America will not be able to face the new challenges if we don't progress for unity in diversity to exercise our rights, including the right to adopt the political, economic, social, and cultural system decided by the peoples according to the motto of the America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace, which was approved in our capital, as you know. We also want to highlight the commitment with the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of our America. We are the region in the world, our continent, our subcontinent, are the region in the world with the highest levels of inequality in distribution of wealth. The gap between the rich and the poor is huge and continues growing. Poverty increases against the efforts of the last decade, regardless of the efforts of the last decade. When progressive and popular governments accrued favorable results for justice, social justice. Today, they're trying to divide us, and they're trying to destroy the community of Latin American and Caribbean states. The tool for American politics is being used once again, and it was always the OAC. And now there are a group of countries, the OAS, and the countries stating they are defending democracy, continue with imperial domination. The aggression against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is today the main element of the efforts of imperialism to overthrow popular governments of the continent, to get rid of the social conquest, and also go against the progressive movements against the neoliberal capital models that are trying to impose. We emphasize our solidarity fully with Venezuela, their legitimate government, and the civic military unit in charge of President Nicolás Maduro Moros, who's part of the legacy of President Hugo Chávez Frías. We ratify our support to other peoples and governments that face the pressure of imperialism to go against the vindication that have been achieved, as in the case of Bolivia and Nicaragua. After the parliamentary coup against Dilma Rousseff, President of Brazil, the arbitrary imprisonment of Lula took place, whose liberty we still fight for. Today, a political prisoner. To prevent him from partaking in the political elections that will take place in Brazil, and that according to the surveys, the surveys of different institutions in Brazil, if elections are held today, then Lula would win. That's why he's in jail. That's why he is accused. That's why. That's why he was sent to jail. Once again, we support the free determination and independence of Puerto Rico. On December 2014, we announced, together with President Barack Obama, the reestablishing of diplomatic relationships with the United States. We started doing this with all the sovereign respect in order to solve problems and provide cooperation for mutual problems. And we saw the differences between the governments, but created a coexistence that was possible and fruitful. The strategic objective of going against the revolution did not stop, but the political environment for both countries showed unquestionable progress, which led to benefits for both. Nevertheless, ever since the current president came to office, there's been a setback from the relationships of Cuba and the United States, and there's an aggressive tone in the statements of this government. This was shown specifically in the presidential memorandum of June 2017, which was created with the worst members of the anti-Cuban members of Florida that want to have the tension between the countries. The economic blockage continued, became worse, and financial persecution has worsened. The occupation of a piece of our territory in Guantánamo continues, with a military base and internal center of arrest and torture. The programs for political subversion have millionaire funding from the American government. They continue recruiting and financing mercenaries as well as radio transmissions that happen legally. They say most of the people of our embassy were expelled from Washington, and the personnel of America was expelled from Havana, including the consulate that had a very important aspect for migration, as well as a prejudice against millions of Cubans that need these services. The main feeling of American citizens and within Cuban immigration continues with the blockage and will favor the continuing of bilateral relations. At the same time, the individuals of the group that have a greater influence on the North American president continue with a hostile behavior against Cuba. We will fight all the attempts to manipulate human rights and everything against our country. We don't need to learn lessons from anyone, lest the government of the States. We fought for almost 150 years for the national independence and defended this at the price of blood and facing the greatest risks. if we restate the conviction that every strategy meant to destroy the revolution through confrontation or seduction, they will have the greatest rejection of the Cuban people and will fail. We live under an international order which is unfair and excluding, where the United States try to preserve their absolute domination against the world trend of moving towards a multipolar system. With this objective, they create new wars, even non-conventional wars. They increase the danger of a nuclear war. They urge the use of force. They use threats and also create unilateral sanctions against those who will not bend their knees against their will. They impose a Korean war, as well as the militarization of land space and cyberspace. And they continue with threats against peace and security internationally. The expansion of NATO to the borders with Russia leads to many dangers that become worsened with the imposition of arbitrary sanctions that we are against. The United States continue with threats and punitive measures, violating the laws of foreign trade against China, also against the European Union, with whom we recently signed an agreement for dialogue and cooperation against their allies as well. The consequences will be harmful for everyone, mainly for southern nations. American imperialism creates conflicts that create waves of refugees. They follow policies of repression that are racist and discriminatory against migrants. They build walls. They militarize borders. And they create unsustainable patterns for consumption and obstaculize the fight against climate change. They use technology platforms to impose their own mindset, manipulating human behavior, invading our cultures, clearing the historic memory and national identity, as well as controlling and corrupting electoral systems. On April 13th, violating the principles of international law and the Charter of the United Nations, the United States and some of their allies from NATO had a military aggression against Syria without any demonstration of the government of this country. Sadly, these unilateral actions have become an unacceptable practice. This has been trialed in different countries in the Middle East and now also in Syria. They should be condemned by the international community. We show our solidarity with the Syrian government and the Syrian people. We shall never forget that on March 2003, only 15 years ago, President George W. Bush, who is the son of the president with the same name, sent an invasion to Iraq by stating that there were mass destruction weapons, and this was false, which was demonstrated years later. Cuba supports the efforts for the defense of the peace, sure that only with dialogue, negotiation, and international cooperation, we will find a solution for the great problems of the world. We thank the solidarity of all the countries, almost with no exceptions, in our fight against the economic and financial blockage. Bilateral relationships with the Russian Federation have increased substantially everywhere for mutual benefits. We will never be ungrateful, and we will never forget the support that we received from the people that were part of the former Soviet Union, especially the Russian people, in the most difficult years after the triumph of our revolutionary process. Likewise, our links with the Popular Republic of China continue in subjects of the economy, politics, and cooperation by creating an important support for the development of our nation. Just a few weeks ago, we were visited by Nguyen Phu Trong, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, showing again the successful development of the links that bond us together, and we're able to identify new potentials. The historic relations with the African countries, the African Union, and also Asia continue going up, and we will continue defending the legitimate vindication of the countries of the South, their rights for development and democracy of the international relations. Every fair cause, specifically the ones of the Palestinian people, as well as the fight for social justice, will be supported by our peoples. The difficult international scenario that I've described shows that what the Commander-in-Chief of the Cuban Revolution in the report to the central government in 1965 stated, I quote, "As long as imperialism exists, the party, the state, and the people will give the services of defense the greatest of attention. The Revolutionary Guard will never stop. History teaches clearly that those who forget this principle don't survive any mistakes." That was the quote. Friends, this is my last page. After only 11 years, our pioneering students, workers, farmers, artists, and intellectuals, members of the Armed Forces and the Ministry of the Interior, the people as a whole, will march on our streets and squares, remembering the International Day of the Workers. And once again, we will show the support of the Cubans for revolution, for our party, and for socialism. And even though I had a commitment to go to a different province in the country, after understanding what's happening in this moment,